Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Microsoft Teams' latest updates. My name is Juan Cuellar, and I am the Senior Instructor at Office Pro. Now, this webinar is sponsored by NSCA. Now, a little background information about Office Pro before we jump in. Established in 1984, Office Pro has over 30 years of experience specializing in professional services and has trained more than 1 million professionals globally, partnering with industry leading companies such as Microsoft, CompTIA, Crestron, PeopleCert, and Pearson VUE, just to name a few. Office Pro provides training, end user adoption programs, certification prep, and test center services on a wide variety of disciplines such as software, information technology, soft skills, professional audio video services, as well as collaboration. Office Pro also offers workforce solutions through staffing and recruiting services for short-term and long-term positions in information technology, help desk, administration, analysts, business process initiatives, human resources, as well as security personnel. All right, well, enough about us. Let's go ahead and jump into today's webinar. Well, Microsoft Teams. It has become a staple of the workforce environment for many years now. And being part of Microsoft 365, Microsoft really likes to continuously improve its services by improving the features, adding more functionality and capability. So much so that it can get very tough to keep up with all the latest updates. So that is what we're here to address today. We're going to take a look at some of the more recent features that have been implemented that you may or may not have come across, but we're going to take a look at how we can leverage them on our day to day. Now, the way that I like to see Teams is under these 5 categories. First, we have the Teams app itself. Then we have chat to conduct our day-to-day communication. Then we have Teams, which is kind of like the cornerstone of Microsoft Teams, and that is specifically designed for collaboration. But we also have virtual meetings, similar to this webinar that we're on now, but we can also access files and manage them from Teams. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through each one of these categories. We're going to go through each one of these categories and discuss what are some of the latest updates in Teams for each category. Let's start off with the Teams app itself. Now, as we know, Teams comes in 3 different flavors. We have the desktop application, the online app, as well as the mobile app. Now, for today's session, we will be focusing on the desktop application as it does offer the most robust experiences, and some of the features that we're going to talk about today are available only through the desktop application. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it and take a look. Now, you can see that I am here in Teams, and this is just a standard Teams implementation. You'll see that the app bar is listed down the left, just like you normally would see. Now, one of the first improvements or enhancements that we want to show you is called the back and forth history. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, on the top left, we've always seen these 2 little arrows that allows us to go to the previous screen or to the screen that we just backed up from. Now, we've always had that, and actually those work very similar to the back and forth arrows in your browser. But one of the latest updates is that if you simply just point to those, notice how it drops down a history of all the different areas of Teams that you've been at. So if you need to back up 3 or 4 pages, you don't have to click the back button 3 times. You just go down, click on where you want to return to, and there you are. Now, that might seem like such a minimal thing, but I have found that to be extremely helpful and more efficient with my time. So there you go, one of the improvements down. Let's keep on going to the next one. Now, the next one we want to talk about is improved searchability. Now, across the top, we've always had this search field. Now, the nice thing about the search field is it can search for messages, files, or even people. Now, it also has the ability to perform certain commands for us. All we have to do is type the / and we get a list of different commands it can run for us. Now, again, none of this is really new, but how it provides us the search results has greatly improved. So let's take a look at an example. Let's say that I know I have recently had a conversation about the budget. Now, I cannot for the life of me find where we had that conversation. So this is what the search is for. I can simply type in the search field, type in the keyword that I'm looking for. Now notice it gives me a couple of tips from this drop-down menu, but if I press enter, you may have noticed that the search results now display quite differently. Before they were only displayed in the white column down the left, but notice now it's taking up the whole screen. Now notice how it gives you some of the top results for messages that match your keyword. It shows you some of the top results for files that match your keyword. Now, if whatever you were searching for matched some of your colleagues' names, notice that it would also have the ability to search for people. But notice how it's, again, only giving you the top messages. So, or the top results for each one of those three categories. So what I want to show you is that across the top, notice that by default, it shows you all the results, but really it's just the top results for all categories. But if I know that I'm looking for a particular message, I can click where it says messages, and immediately it starts filtering this to show me only messages instead of people or files. Now, again, it still shows me some top results. At the bottom, it continues with all the results. And if these are not the ones I'm looking for, I can just click next, and notice how it loads the next page of results. And I can keep on clicking next until I find the specific message I was looking for. But you know this can be daunting because there's going to be so much content in Teams that may match what you're looking for. So here's the best part. Notice how across the top we have all of these refiners where we can refine the search results with different attributes. Let me give you an example. Now, I know I'm looking for a message, but what if I'm looking for a message where I know there was a file attached? Well, notice I can check has attachments. And boom, immediately it filters the search results. And notice all of the other options that we have. Notice that we can hide results from different apps or bots, so we only see messages from actual people. We can filter to only show me messages where I have been mentioned, or from particular dates or date ranges, from a specific person. Now, notice all the way to the left, you can specify if this message was in a chat or a team channel. So again, I can filter that way as well. Now, once I've filtered as much as I can and I've refined the search results, I can then start looking into this, getting more details. And if I find the message that I think is the one I'm looking for, I can click on it and notice that it takes me directly to it. If that's not the one I wanted, I can just hit the back arrow, brings me back to the search results, and I can keep on going to another one. Now notice if I don't want to necessarily jump to it, but maybe I want to preview and I can just not click on the name, on the title of it, but just click on it there and notice how it expands it. And then if I choose to jump over, I can click go to message. And notice there is the message I was looking for. So as you can see, these search capabilities have greatly been improved from when Teams initially got released. All right, now I'm just going to go back to my chat here. Now, another improvement that we have is that Microsoft has now incorporated out of the office in with Teams. Now, I know we've had out of the office in Outlook forever. Now, actually, in Outlook has been renamed automatic replies. But wouldn't it be helpful if I can just set that up here? Well, check this out. On the top right where you see your profile menu, of course, when you click on it, you get your account information, you get your status. But right next to that, you have a status message where you can have a message display whenever somebody tries to reach out to you. So you can let them know what you're up to, or maybe that you're not going to be available until noon, or whatever you want that message to say. But if I click status message, notice how I also have the option to enable the out of office. Now, if I click on that, you'll notice I'll get the out of office window where really it's going to be almost identical to the experience we have in Outlook. But now I don't have to jump over to Outlook to do so. I can turn on the automatic replies. I can provide a nice little message. I can choose if it'll send replies to people in my organization or what time range I want those messages sent through. So as you can see, you can configure that from Teams as well as Outlook. All right. Now, the last one for the Teams application in general. Now we have what's called notification styles. Let me give you an example. Let me minimize Teams here, and let's just say I'm here, right? Now, let's say that one of my colleagues is going to send me a chat message. So I'm opening up Teams from another window here using a different account. And let's say my colleague Dwight is going to send me a quick message. Now, as you may know, we get the notifications on the bottom right. These are called, some people call it the toaster. I believe Teams call it the banner. But okay, notice I can reply to it from here, or I could have just clicked on it to go to the full chat. Now, that is the standard what we've had. But did you know that Windows has its own notification system? And now Teams allows you to choose whether you want to use the Teams notification pane or the Windows notification pane. So let me show you how you can configure it and then why you may want to do so. So going back to Teams, going back to the top right, this time we're gonna click the ellipsis next to your profile menu, which is the settings menu, and then we're going to click the settings option. Now, from the settings option down the left, you're going to see many categories. For this, we want to stay under general. And you'll need to scroll down. Let's see here. Oh, look at that. It actually hasn't been applied into this one quite yet. Oh, that's interesting. Well, here's what I'm going to do. While we come back to this, I'm going to show you a slightly different feature here because it looks like some of the updates maybe hasn't been implemented in this installation of Teams. So this is actually a good learning opportunity. If you ever are looking for a feature that you know is there, maybe your colleague has it, but it's not been implemented in yours yet, going back to the settings, notice that there's an option that says check for updates. Now, when you click check for updates, notice that it'll say we will check for updates, but you can continue working in the meanwhile. So we'll let that do its thing, but we'll come back to that in a little bit and see if that gets implemented. Now, in the meanwhile, let's move on to the next category. The next category is chats. Now, as some of you may know, this is a great way to conduct your standard day-to-day communications. But let's take a look at some of the updates that we have available here. Now let's go back to Teams, and for this, we'll go down the left and make sure we are under Chat. Now, when you go to Chat, you're going to see your recent conversations listed down the left. But if you need to start a brand new chat, across the top, you have the New Chat button. And notice it gives you a brand new chat and it asks, who do you want to chat with, right? But notice how it opened it here. It opened it here within the standard Teams window. Now, let me go ahead and discard this. Now, some of you may have seen where you can take an existing chat and pop it out into its own window. Some of us really like the fact that I can pop out a chat in its own window so I don't get confused between all of the different conversations that I have. But the feature that I want to bring to your attention is that when we create new chats, now you can choose if you want to keep it within the standard Teams window or if you want to pop it out into a new one. So let's go back to settings. Now, still here under general, notice that it says here, open new chat in window. Now, right now it says in the main window, but if you prefer to have it pop out, you can check a new window. That's it. You can now close it. That way, anytime going forward, when you go to chat and you start a new chat conversation, notice it does default to open it in its own window. Now, again, that is up to each individual's preference. Some people really like having those conversations to separate windows. Other people like to minimize the number of windows on their screen, so they may prefer to keep it in the main window. But there you go. Now, a somewhat recent update is now the fact that you can, for a lack of a better term, chat to yourself. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what? What is that? Why? Why would you want to do that? Well, you may have noticed that in the list of chats across the top, you may have noticed that there is a new chat with your own account. Now, right now, I'm using Sheldon Cooper's account. This is just my training account. But notice I have a chat with myself and it says you. Now, why? Why is that? Well, if I click on it, notice how it says, this is your space. This chat is for you, with you. Use it for drafts, send files to yourself, or get to know chat features a little better. And once I kind of saw that description, it kind of made sense. At first, I was like, well, that's kind of silly. There's no use case for that. But I have had the case where, as Teams releases new features and I see new buttons and I want to play around with them, I have to involve one of my colleagues to kind of play around and figure out what they do. But now I have my very own space where I can do that just with myself and play around with the different features and test things out without having to bother one of my colleagues. Now, if for whatever reason you don't see that chat with yourself automatically pinned, then you would just simply start a new chat and address it to yourself. And then it'll just show up in your recent. And if you want, you can then choose to pin the chat across the top. But again, so that's a nice little interesting feature there as well. Okay, now the last new feature that we have in chats is the fact that you can reply to chats. Have you ever had the situation where you're in a chat? Let's say I'm in the chat here with my colleague Dwight, and you've been having so much conversations that now you've accumulated this huge history of conversation. But maybe you want to go back to a previous message. Maybe you want to go back to a previous message, but then I have the tendency to feel like I have to explain what I'm referring to. So check this out. Over here, I asked Dwight if he will be attending the meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. And notice I see that he replied, yes, he's going to be there. But what if I want to go back to that message and ask him if he got the opportunity to prepare the presentation? So what I can now do is I can point to a message, to any message. And by the way, I can do that with my own as well. But the point is, along with the reactions, we also have this ellipsis that gives us more options. And from here, notice we have the reply. Now watch, when I click reply, notice how it pins that message along with what I'm going to write so that when I send this out to Dwight, he'll see what I'm referring to. So I'm going to ask, did you get a chance to prepare the presentation? All right. And so now if I send it, notice my message was sent along with what I was referring to. So again, that can really help kind of clarify what I'm referring to, especially if we're talking about different topics. All right. Now, the next one, Teams. And like I mentioned, Teams is basically the cornerstone of this application called Microsoft Teams. Now, as we know, Teams is specifically for team collaboration. So let's take a look at what are some of the recent updates and enhancements there. Now, the first thing we need to do when working with Teams is we want to go down the left-hand side. From here, we can click Teams. And as you can see, I have two teams listed here. I'm a member of two different teams. But the first feature we want to talk about is the fact that if you need to create a new team, now you don't have to create it from scratch. You can now base a new team based off of various templates that Microsoft Teams will provide for you. So let's take a look. Once you're in the Teams section, on the bottom left, you have the option that says Join or Create a Team. Now, notice how I have an option that says Create a Team. I will add a little caveat. Some organizations choose to have a little bit more control over who can create a team and all the teams that are being created. So some organizations leave it up to IT to create the teams, and there's some kind of request process. But the point is, if in your organization you do have the ability to create a team, notice when I click Create Team, it still does let me create a team from scratch. However, if I already have a Microsoft 365 group, I can associate my team with that group. But notice as I scroll down, I start seeing all of these great templates that I can base my new team off of. Now, some of these are kind of very specific. So if I want to create a team for a bank branch or patient care or manage a store or a hospital or retail managers, frontline. So again, some of these are really specific, but one that I found helpful is one of the top ones that says either manage a project or manage an event. So let's say that I have a conference coming up in the fall and that's an event I need to manage. So let's take a look at what this template offers us. When it says manage an event and I click on it, notice that it gives me a list of the channels that it will automatically create for me. Now every team always gets a general channel, but in an event we may want to post announcements, we may need to discuss the budget, content, logistics, planning, marketing, and PR. So it'll create all of those automatically for me. Now notice how it also has some suggested apps that we may be able to leverage. Now, if that looks good, then you can click Next. Now, it'll still allow you to choose if this is a public team where anybody in your organization can join, or a private team where you can have a little control over who joins. I'm going to create it as a private team and call it Fall Conference 2022. As usual, you can add a description. Now, notice how, since I'm basing it off of a template and it's going to have some suggested channels, it does give me the opportunity here to customize them and rename them if I so choose. But I'm happy with that for now, so I'm going to just go ahead and click Create. So again, it's going to create the team, and then it's going to automatically start kicking off all of the other elements, such as creating those channels, adding all of those apps. Now, because it's got to do all of those extra steps, notice how it may take a little extra time. All right. So we'll just be patient with it and let it do its thing. But in the meanwhile, let's talk about some of the next features that we're going to take a look at. Now, some of the other features that have been recently made available in Teams is the fact that we can pin posts from any channel. Now, while this is doing its thing, let me open up my browser here. Now, you'll notice here in my browser, I'm logged in as a different account into the Teams web app. I'm logged in as Dwight here. Now, Dwight, if he needs to, he can go to Teams, and we can see that he is a member of a couple of teams here. Now, now let's say that under one of these channels, we want to post something, but we want to make sure that people can find that post. It might be a description of what the channel is for. It might be some vital information. So the point is, again, when we are in a channel, remember, this is group conversations and there's going to be a ton of history here. So if we posted something 3 months ago, it could be really hard for my users to get back to that post. So let's take a look at an example. Now, notice over here, there is a post that Sheldon posted back in February, but I think that my users can really benefit from easily finding this specific post. So now what we can do is point to the post and go back to the little pop-up menu with the reactions. And from the top here on the ellipsis, you'll notice that we have an option that's called pin. Now, it says, are you sure you want to pin this? We're going to click pin. And that's it. Now, and you're not limited just to one, but the posts that have been pinned, notice, get this green left border. It gets a little pin icon. But what did this actually do? Well, again, if this post at some point gets lost in the conversation history, now again, your users would need to know this. So this would be just a matter of telling them, hey, if you ever want to see the pinned posts in a particular channel, go to the channel, and on the top right, you're going to see the information icon. And when you click the information icon, it'll open up the information pane for that channel. It'll provide them the about information, the members of the team, and notice across the bottom, here are those pinned posts. So even though we might be lost in this conversation history, from the information, we can click on it. Notice it takes me directly to it without having to go hunt it down. You see that? So and let me go back here. And the nice thing about this is that every channel can have its own set of pinned posts. So again, think about some posts that may be vital for your users to be able to get to from each channel. You can post one or multiple posts in the information pane per channel. All right. Now, we can see that this is still doing its thing. And again, this is, like I said, it's going to take some time for it to continue working. But notice it says, feel free to close this window and do other things. We'll let you know when it's ready. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that. I can already see that new team here, but right now it's still in the background working on all of those other components, such as the suggested channels and adding all the apps. So again, it might take some time for it to process all of that. But in the meanwhile, let's take a look at the next team enhancement. The next team enhancement is called channel calendars. Channel calendars. Now for this, I'm going to go to the training team. I'm going to expand the training team, and you can see that as always, we have the general channel. We have a channel for new course ideas, outlines, registrations, virtual programs. Now, let's say that I want to schedule a meeting where we're going to be interviewing some new instructors. Now, what I want to show you is that if I go to the calendar where we usually go to schedule a meeting, we can go and click on the new meeting, and we can give the meeting a title, right? So, interview new instructors. Now, from here, I can add all of my invitees. So I'm going to include my colleague Dwight. Maybe I want to include my colleague Phoebe. We can select the date and time. So I'll select next Wednesday from 1 through 4 p.m. We're going to interview quite a number of new instructors, so we'll need a good amount of time. But here's what I want to show you. There is a special field here where if the meeting that I'm creating is related or associated with a team or channel, I can add that here. So notice if I go to add channel, it asks, well, what team do you want to associate it with? So I'm going to go to the training. And then it asks me, well, which channel should we relate it to? Now, since there's no channel specifically on instructors, I'll just put it under general. Okay, now, side note, if you do decide to associate a channel with your meetings, please note that that cannot be changed at a later time. Okay, now for right now, I'm going to go ahead and just send it. Now you'll notice if I go to my next week, it's scheduling that meeting. Now, let's say that I want to schedule another meeting that's going to be related to that team. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to start off by adding the team training. We'll go to, let's say we want to talk about, new series. So I'm going to go to the general and discuss new training series. And again, you can add all your invitees. Notice, by the way, I just got a notification that my new team is ready, but we'll come back to that in a second. I'll add my colleague Phoebe. Okay. And we'll schedule it for next Tuesday from 10 to noon. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and send that. Now, you can see that both of these meetings are on my calendar because I'm the one that scheduled it. Now, you may have seen in the past where once you associate a meeting with a team, if we go back to that team and that channel, those meetings do get posted here, right? But I want to show you something else. Let's go back to Dwight's view. So notice over here, I'm back and I'm scheduled as Dwight. Now, Dwight is also a member of the training team. And you can see that he sees all of the resources here. Now, let's say that he wants to schedule a meeting to discuss the training budget. Okay, so what he's going to do is he's going to do the same thing. He's going to go to the calendar. He's going to and he's going to schedule a meeting, and we'll discuss the training budget. Now, let's say he's going to include Ross, Rachel, and Phoebe. Now, let's say that he's going to schedule the meeting for next Friday, and it'll be a short meeting, so we'll set it from 11 through noon. Now, again, we want to associate it with the training team, so we're going to go back, select the training team, the general channel, and then send. Now, notice Dwight did not include Sheldon. So Sheldon wasn't directly invited to that meeting, but because Sheldon is a member of the training team, when he goes to the general channel, he'll see that that budget meeting scheduled there, right? Now, here's the thing. If Sheldon here goes to his calendar and takes a look at next week's meeting, now notice he can see the 2 meetings he scheduled. This one over here is here as tentative, but what I want to show you is that if your users are working from the team channel itself, it might be beneficial to have a tab available here with all of the meetings that are only related to that channel. Now, let me get rid of this one here because that's what we're going to add here in a second. So let's take a look at this new option. Once you have several meetings that have been associated to a channel, what we can do is we can go across the top of that channel, click the plus. Now, it's going to have tons of options for you. These are tons of different tabs, but if you're looking for a particular tab, you can search for it. So I'm going to just search for calendar. And notice it brought to the top the channel calendar. So now I can click on it to add it. I can choose what to name it, and I can choose if it'll post an announcement in that channel to let people know that I've added that tab. So I'll go ahead and just click add here. And notice, just like that, now across the top of this channel, I can see this extra tab. Now, what does this do? Well, what this does is that now every time somebody goes to that channel and they want to see all the meetings that are related to the channel, of course they can see them posted, but again, they may get lost in history here, in the conversation history. So now all they have to do is go to that channel calendar tab, and they can navigate to the dates that they're looking for, and notice, voila, there they are. So now we want to make sure this doesn't get confusing, because this is now the channel calendar that'll only show you the meetings that are related to this channel, versus the calendar button here, which essentially shows you your schedule. Okay? All right. Now, let's go take a look at that new team that we created. So notice now I have my Fall Conference 2022, I have my general calendar, all of these other, or excuse me, my general channel, and all of these other channels that are available for us. Now, the last feature that we want to show you with Teams is the fact that, have you ever had the situation that you have a meeting with some helpful information that you want to share with the team? Well, let's take a look at how that has been enhanced. If I go to my Outlook, you'll notice that here I have an email that has been automatically sent to me after I registered for the fall conference. And notice how it's giving me some of the logistical information, such as the date, the location, the check-in process. And I'm thinking it would be helpful to share this with the whole fall conference team. Well, once you're on that meeting note, or once you're on that email rather, notice how I can click across the top. This is on the home tab of the Outlook application, and I can click share to teams. Now, it opens it up in a separate window. Notice how it includes the content of the email, and it says type the name of the person, group, or channel. Now, again, I could essentially send this email via Teams to a colleague, a group, or a channel within a team. Now, I have that new fall conference team that I just created, so I'm thinking let's share it there. So I'm going to start typing in fall conference. And notice here's my fall conference 2022. So I can select it and then click share. And it says your meeting is on its way to Teams. Now I can either, go to Teams, or I could just close it. At this point, I'll just close it and I'm set to go. But let's go take a look at Teams. If I go back to Teams, notice that I'm back here under the new team in the general channel where I forwarded that email, and notice here it is. Notice how it says Sheldon, and it includes all of the email information, such as the date, who it was sent from, who it was sent to, but of course, all of the information. And so now all of the there you go. And so now all of the other members of that team will have access to it. So instead of forwarding it to all of the team members' emails, I could just post it here, and everybody now has one central place to refer to that content. Pretty nice, right? All right. Now, let's move on to meetings. Now, meetings have had quite a bit of updates. So let's take a look at a couple of those. Now, first of all, when we're dealing with meetings, you'll probably want to start off by going to the calendar pane. Now, I've always considered that there are two types of meetings, either scheduled meetings or ad hoc meetings. Ad hoc meetings mean meetings that haven't been scheduled in advance, but you kind of want to just do it on the spot, right? Now, Teams calls those Meet Now. Now, a recent enhancement is that when you click Meet Now, it would just immediately start the meeting, and you can start adding people to that meeting. However, notice that if I click Meet Now, while I can start the meeting right here, notice that now I have the option to get the link to the meeting to share. Not only that, but I can give this meeting a name. So let's say I want to talk about design signage for that fall conference, right? Okay, so I can give the meeting a name, and I'm going to click Get Link to Share. And notice it says, all right, it's copied. It's copied. Okay, well, now what, right? Well, I can click Share via email, or if I just want to coordinate with my colleague Dwight, I could just go to the chat and I could send him a post that says, hey there, let's plan on connecting at 3 p.m. And what I can do now is paste that link and then just send it off. So again, notice that while I'm still kind of coordinating a meeting a little bit in advance, I don't have to go through the whole process of going to my calendar, scheduling the meeting. Of course, some people may prefer to do that, but now with these Meet Nows, I could copy the link and share it in some other way. All right, so that's the first one. The other option is webinars. Now, in Teams, for a long time, we've had two different types of events. We have had meetings and live events, but now there's a third one that's called webinars. Now, let's take a look at this. Let's say that at the end of August, let's say on August 25th, let's say on August 25th, I want to schedule a webinar on strategic delegation for workload balance, right? So now what I can do is, instead of clicking new meeting, notice there's a drop down next to it where it lets me choose what type of event I want. Now, there are tons of benefits to scheduling a webinar. For example, you'll be able to keep track of registrations, add event details, manage the presenters, and stuff like that. So let's take a look. I'm going to click Webinar. Notice how initially it looks very similar to a meeting, but if you give it a second, it updates it. And there are some subtle changes. So let's take a look. The first thing we want to do is add a title. So strategic delegation for workload balance. Now, in this case, you don't send this meeting invitation to all of the attendees. I'm going to show you what we're going to do with that in a second. But the only ones you invite, quote unquote, are going to be the presenters. Now, if you're going to be the only presenter, then you don't need to invite others. But if there are going to be other presenters, then you just add them here. You see that? Now, of course, you can select the date and time. So we'll schedule for the 25th. This will be scheduled from 1 to 2:30. It'll be a 90-minute session. Now, this will be a virtual webinar, so we'll leave the location. You can add a description here for the invitees here. But here's the best part about this. Notice how across the top it says, want your attendees to register for the webinar? Send them the link to the registration form. You can customize it to better suit your need. So watch this, view registration form. And from here, you can essentially, this is the registration page where people will go register for the event. So you can add the title, you can specify the date and times. And I think we schedule what for the 25th from 1 to 2:30. Let's see here, 1 to, there we are, 2:30. And again, now these details here are the details that the registrants are going to see. On the bottom, you can specify who the guest speakers are going to be. So I'm going to add guest speakers, and I'll add Dwight Schrute. Make sure I spelled that right. Yep, there is an E there. I can even add a bio for him. But here's the best part. Notice I can determine what information we want to collect from the registrants. It does default to name, last name, email. But notice I can add fields. I can add address fields that are kind of pre-made. So let's say I want them to provide me their organization. Boom, done. Now I could choose if that's going to be required or not. I can also add custom fields. You see that? I can ask them to provide an input or have them choose from different options. So again, that's super nice. But to make this even more presentable, notice how we can upload an image to put across the top. So I'm going to upload an image here. You can just navigate to wherever you have your images. Select whatever image you want to use, reposition it, click OK or done. Now, if you're not a fan of it, maybe you change your mind. You can just go upload another image on the top right, change the image that you want to use, and again, reposition it. You can even zoom in if you need to. Let's go ahead and use that. So notice it makes it a little bit more presentable. Now, I'm going to click Save on the top left. And that's it. But here's the important part. How do we get this to our audience? Well, notice across the top it says copy registration link. So I can click copy registration link, and that's it. So now you can put this in an email blast, you can put this on the website, you can send it to a team, you can include it in your presentations or documents, whatever you want. And just so we can take a look at how that looks, when I go to that link, this is what the registrants will see. You see that? This is what the registrants will see. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and close that. And at this point, I am ready to finalize this and send this to my colleague Dwight here. So again, I know that a lot of times people have had the need to keep track of the registrants for these events that we schedule. Well, now these webinars give us that ability, because this does not get sent to the attendees automatically, but rather you're going to need to share that link. You're going to need to share that link, right? And then they're going to need to register to be able to attend. Okay? All right. Now, another really nice feature that I actually appreciated is very simple but super helpful. How many of you use categories in the Outlook calendar? Well, now for your meetings here, we also have categories here, and it's going to be the same customized categories, that you have in Outlook. So now you can leverage them here for the benefit of your organization. So if I say, well, this is going to be training, categorize it, and then close it, and that's it. And you'll notice that the colors will update. So if instead I change that to, let's say, let me remove training, but let me change it to fall conference, notice that's more of a red color. So notice it will update that. So I know that a lot of us are visual people like myself, and I like to use these colors to clearly distinguish one type of meeting from another. All right. Now, one last thing about meetings, and then we'll move on to files. What about polls? As we are conducting this webinar, I want to be able to poll my users. Well, now there's, and we've always had third-party methods to do that, but now there's a way to automatically do it all within Teams. So check this out. I can open up whatever meeting, and across the top, you're going to see various tabs, but notice I can click on this plus and add a new tab. Now, notice right off the top, I see the polls tab. I can select it, and it gives me some information. I'm going to just click add. Once it's added, I can save, and then it's going to take me to that tab. Now, the nice thing is you can create these polls ahead of time, or you can create them on the spot during the event. Now, when you go to it, notice how it gives you some suggestions as to what kind of questions or polls you can create. But let's say I have my own. I want to ask my audience if they are already managing others. So I can go to the top left and click New Poll. There are 4 kinds of polls. I can select a multiple choice, a quiz to kind of test their knowledge, a word cloud for more open-ended questions, or a rating. Now, in this case, I'm going to use multiple choice, and I'm going to ask, do you already manage others? And the options I want are simple: yes or no. That's it. Now down here, notice I have different options for this particular poll. Do I want to record the names of these people, or do I want it to be anonymous? Notice it'll only be available to me, not the attendees. So I'm going to go ahead and share that. Or record that. Then it says, do I want to share the aggregated results with the respondents? So do I want people to see how many, not who, but how many people responded yes or no? So I'll leave that checked. You can even choose to allow co-presenters to edit the polls while they're in draft. Let's say I don't want that. So I'm going to just save it, and there's that first poll. Now, at the end of the webinar, I want to poll them for some feedback. So I'm going to go to a new poll. I'm going to create a rating. I'm going to ask them to rate, did they find this webinar relevant to their jobs? Now, notice you can choose how many levels of ratings. You see that? You can choose what symbols to use, whether stars, numbers, hearts, whatever symbols you'd like. And then the labels. So I'm going to choose not relevant or very relevant. That way they understand the rating system. Now, in this case, maybe I want this to be anonymous. I want them to feel comfortable in being honest, so I'm not going to record their names, but maybe I don't want to share that with the whole group either. So that'll just be for my own edification. So I'll go ahead and save that there. Now, one more. I'm going to go back to polls. This time I'm going to create a word cloud. And I'm going to ask, what are your key takeaways? Now, again, I don't need to record it, but maybe I do want to show people the word cloud. I can then save as draft, and there we are. Now, again, if you want a little bit more details on how that's going to work, you can take a look at the examples here. So notice here's an example of what the word cloud would look like, a multiple choice. So you can kind of get a better feel of that. All right. Now, one last thing, I'm going to show you how you can post these. I'm going to quickly join this webinar, and I don't need video. I don't really even need audio because I just want to show you once you are in the webinar. Once you are in the webinar, you'll notice that if you added polls, there will be a polls button across the top. And this will show you all the polls that you have made ahead of time. Or, like I said, you can create new polls on the spot. And to launch one, you simply click launch. And notice it'll pop it up for all the users. They can select their options and submit it. Now, you'll be able to see the responses, but if you chose to share those responses, it'll show the responses to all the users. Now, once you want to close the poll, going back to the polls pane, you can click the little drop down, close it, so people cannot continue to vote. And then you can move on to the next poll whenever you're ready. You see that? So then people will be able to vote on their response and go from there. And of course, all of this information will be available to you after that meeting or event. Okay, last but not least, files. Now, there have been, in my opinion, some very important updates from files. Because let's talk about files. From Teams, you are able to access files from your OneDrive or from the files that have been shared in Teams. But did you know that you can share files as well? You can share files through chats or team channels. Now, let's take a look at how that works. Let me go back to the chat with my colleague Dwight here. Now, when you share a file with a colleague through chat, you can click on this paperclip icon and you can choose a file from your computer or from your OneDrive. Now, I have a file on my OneDrive that I want to share, and I'm going to go to Financial Documents. Notice here I have charges for supplies, and then I can click Share. Now, here is the important part, because in the past, it sent those recipients a link to my file in my OneDrive with editing permissions. But notice that now I have a little description of what permissions I'm sending them across the bottom here. It says people in your organization with this link can edit. Now, what that means is I'm sending him a link allowing him to edit, but notice it says people in my organization. So what if Dwight decides to forward that link to 15 other people? I may not want that. So watch this. I can now click this little down arrow, and I have full control over what permissions I want to share. So I like to select people currently in this chat. Maybe I don't want him to edit it. I just want him to be able to read it. And notice I could choose to block him from downloading it. I just want him to be able to access it online, but I'll just allow that for now. Click apply, and notice now it says people currently in this chat with this link can view. So then I can click send. So now I have greater control over what permissions I'm sharing when I attach files in a chat. Now, the same thing happens now if I share a file in team channels. So for example, remember the new team? Well, I have a couple of files that I want to share. So in the budget, I want to share a spreadsheet that I already got working with. So I'm going to start a new conversation. I'm going to attach a file, give it a second here. Now it's going to allow me to select from different resources. So I'm going to just select from my OneDrive. And again, notice here is that budget. Now notice, and here it works a little differently because in the past, when we shared files in channels, it would always upload a copy of that file for that team to manage. But what if I don't want multiple copies of the budget floating around, but I want to give my team access to my budget in my OneDrive? So instead of uploading a copy, notice now I can share a link to the file in my OneDrive if I prefer to do so. Now again, below that, because I'm sharing a link from my OneDrive, I have control over what permissions I want to share. Now again, I don't want my entire team updating the budget. I just need them to have access to the numbers. And I'm going to block downloads because again, I don't want multiple copies of that spreadsheet floating around. So I'm going to just click apply and then send it off. You see that? Now, there may be a time where you do want to upload a copy. So under general, maybe I want to share the agenda. And I would like to have a copy of that agenda uploaded for the team. So I can click upload a copy. Notice the green progress bar indicated it was being uploaded to that team's SharePoint site. And now when I post it, that team now has a copy of that file. Now watch, if I go to logistics, maybe I want to share some pictures from the venue that we've chosen. So I'm going to repeat the process here. I'm going to grab those files from my OneDrive. And let's see here. So I'm going to share the floor plan, ballroom, and it actually lets me only select one at a time. So I'm going to upload a copy and then repeat the process. Floor plan. All right, so and then I'm just going to go ahead and post that. And notice it did share the floor plan for the venue. Now here's the key difference. When I shared the floor plan, I uploaded a copy. So notice if I go to that channel's files tab, I can see that file listed. The same thing for the agenda, I see that those files listed. But if I go back to the budget where I shared the link to my file in my OneDrive, notice that file is not here because technically it is in my OneDrive. So I'm basically redirecting them back to my OneDrive. All right, guys. Well, guess what? That is Microsoft Teams' latest updates. Now, we are out of time, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start to wrap up, and I just want to thank all of you for attending today. I want to mention that if you are interested in any additional training or any of our other services, you are more than welcome to contact us, and the best point of contact is Beth Chernoff, who is our Vice President of Client Engagement. Now, I'm also going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you're more than welcome to post them in the chat or the questions pane, and I'll be more than happy to address them. Now, I see there's already a question that says, can we organize the teams created by others? Like, I have a ton of teams created by others. How do I organize them, either by name or client? Well, let's take a look here. So when you have multiple teams, then the question is, how do I organize them? Well, notice that I can click and drag these teams in whatever order I want. You see that? So you can organize them that way. Now, if there are some teams that you've been added to that you don't really access that frequently, then you can choose to hide those teams. So if I don't really work with the human resources that often, I can go to the ellipsis and hide it. Now, that doesn't mean you got removed. That doesn't mean you no longer have access. That just means it won't clutter your interface. And what you can do is expand the hidden teams when you need to access it, but at least you can just keep the most relevant ones there. Now, I will also add that besides the teams, you can also pinpoint the exact channels you want to focus on. So for example, I know that the budget channel I'm going to work with frequently. So I can go to that channel and pin it. Okay. And notice how it took it to the top of the list. And maybe I'm also going to work with the logistics channel. So I'm going to pin that to the top. But under my training, I know I'm going to be working with the outline, so I'll pin that one. So notice if you pin specifically the channels that you are exclusively working with, you don't even need to show the teams, maybe just the channels that are most relevant to you. All right, so I hope that is helpful. Now, I see a question that says, can you delete chat members from your teams listed under chats? Well, I assume we're talking about these chats here, not the channels in Teams. Now, the short answer is yes. If you have a group chat, so notice here I have a group chat with multiple members. You see that? I have all of these members here. Now, if we originally added Amy, but then later decided, you know what, she actually doesn't really need to be part of this conversation, we could just go to the list of the chat members here, look for Amy, and then just delete her. And it says, are you sure? Yeah, let's go ahead and remove Amy. And that's it. Okay. Now, I see a follow-up question that says, wait, what about a single person? Okay, so if you're having a one-on-one chat, not a group chat, so here I have a one-on-one chat. Now, I get this question all the time. Can I delete this entire conversation, all the conversation history? And the answer is no. Teams is considered a perpetual chat application, meaning it'll keep these conversations forever by default. I will say that for compliance purposes or regulatory purposes, some organizations can apply retention policies at the server level where they can determine a specific amount of time to keep that history, but that is up to IT to control. For example, some organizations only keep it for a year, other organizations keep it for 3 months, other for 1 month, other for 24 hours. But again, that's a setting at the organization level. If you're saying, I want to delete an entire conversation with one individual, you cannot delete an entire conversation, but here's what you can do. You can delete a message that you sent, but unfortunately it does have to be on a message by message basis. So for example, this hello, if I no longer want that there, right, I can point to it, click on the ellipsis, and delete that message, and there you go. But notice that does nothing for the rest of the conversation. Also, I cannot delete a message sent by others. However, just to kind of follow up on that, if your list of recent conversations here start to get cluttered, now again, you cannot delete those conversations, but what you could do is go to one of those conversations, click on the ellipsis, and hide it. Now notice here I have a conversation with Dwight, Rachel, and Phoebe. Now, I'm Sheldon at the moment, so if I choose to hide this conversation, notice it removes it from my list of recent conversations, but it technically did not delete it. What it did is just removed it from here, but some of those other members can still have access to it, and that history is still stored. Okay? Great questions. If there are any other questions, feel free to go ahead and let us know. Will you share the presentation in any way to have notes? Yes, this presentation, this webinar is being recorded, and you will get an email with the link so you can watch it over again. Thank you for asking. Great question. All right. Any other questions? Very well. Well, again, I want to thank you all for taking the time to follow along with us today. I hope you found some of the tips and tricks on some of the latest updates helpful. And again, feel free to contact us if you are interested in any training on Teams or other products or any of our other services. Thanks again and have a great afternoon.